Who are some players that are gaining steam and hitting their stride right when it matters as we head into the fantasy playoffs? I'm going to tell you. Welcome back, Endgame community. It's Chris, and today I'm going to talk about some players who look like they're ready to go off when it matters most down the stretch and in the fantasy playoffs. Let's talk about them. And let's start at running back, and let's start with Ramondre Stevenson. And look, Ramondre Stevenson has been great all year, but the stars are really aligning for Ramondre Stevenson right now to absolutely smash down the stretch and through the fantasy playoffs and all the way to the fantasy championship, because Damian Harris once again is injured with a thigh injury. He's already been ruled out for Thursday night's game, and we don't know how long it's going to be. But I don't really think it matters even if he comes back, because Ramondre Stevenson has been a beast this year. But he hasn't necessarily been a beast on the ground. He's been a beast through the air, which I don't think a lot of people expected. I know I didn't. I know there was some talk that maybe he could catch more passes this year, but I don't think anybody expected Ramondre Stevenson to be the PPR monster he has been this season. And there's no reason to think it should stop, because Mac Jones is a guy who will gladly take the check down to Ramondre Stevenson. And Ramondre Stevenson has done a great job improving his ability in the passing game. So to me, Ramondre Stevenson, a bit of foreshadowing here. Later on in the week, we're going to reveal our top 12 playoff running backs. Ramondre Stevenson is in it. I won't tell you where he's at, but he's in it. But definitely Ramondre Stevenson, a guy, if you have him, you got to be feeling great about him right now, because it looks like he's hitting his stride when it matters. And then another running back who always just seems to be there at the end and help teams win championships is David Montgomery, and it looks like he's going to do it again. Since Khalil Herbert has gone on IR, he's scored at least 14 fantasy points in each of those two games. He's averaging 15 carries per game and 4 targets in each of those games. And there's no guarantee that Khalil Herbert will be back as soon as he's eligible to be back from IR. Number one, we don't know the severity of the injury. And number two, the Bears just may be out of it at that point, probably will be out of it at that point, and could just say there's no point in bringing Khalil Herbert back. And once again, David Montgomery has a very good playoff schedule and could once again be a guy who doesn't really do a whole lot for 2/3 of the season, and then down the stretch helps teams win championships. It seems like David Montgomery does it every year, and he's primed to do it again this year. All right, we got a lot of wide receivers to talk about, and we got to start with Christian Watson. What a run Christian Watson is on right now. 6 touchdowns over the last 3 games. The guy only has 21 catches this year, but he's got 6 touchdowns. The guy is on the heater of all heaters, and you have to keep riding it. And there's reasons to think that it may not stop, because, look, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Jordan Love, it doesn't matter. This team does not have a lot of weapons, and they don't have a vertical down the field weapon other than Christian Watson. Alan Lazard, Randall Cobb, they kind of do the same thing. They run those, crossing routes, those intermediate, shorter routes. Christian Watson is the burner, the vertical guy. And look, even with Jordan Love in week 12, Christian Watson was able to hit on a long touchdown because he just has that kind of ability. So Christian Watson, if you grabbed him off of waivers or if you drafted him and held on to him this long, you got to be feeling great. He looks like he's skyrocketing, heading into the fantasy playoffs. Right when you need him, he's delivering. So congrats if you got Christian Watson. I think he's going to be one of those guys that helps teams win fantasy championships. And then now from a rookie to a veteran, but another player who really didn't do a whole lot for most of the season and now has started to explode, and that is Chris Godwin. And it looks like he may finally be fully recovered and fully healthy from that ACL injury, or at least healthy enough to be more than fantasy relevant. He might be a fantasy stud again, because the last 2 games for Tampa Bay, he's been the number 1 receiver. He's badly outscored Mike Evans, 19 and 20 plus points in each of those games. Also 21 targets and 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. This is the Chris Godwin, that we've seen the last couple of years. And the guy that people drafted, he was drafted really high. People thought he was going to come out of the gate and be this Chris Godwin. He hasn't. But again, maybe he's healthy now, coming out of the bye. He looks good. If you drafted Chris Godwin and held on to Chris Godwin, you've got to be feeling great. Looks like he's set up to absolutely smash rest of the season. He could absolutely be a league winner at the wide receiver position. And then a wide receiver I definitely did not think I would be talking about this year is Zay Jones. But we have to take Zay Jones serious at this point, because number one, Trevor Lawrence looks like he has made the leap and he is ready to be the guy. I'll talk about him later. But number two, Zay Jones has actually been really good this year, and especially the last 2 games, double-digit targets in both games, at least 14 fantasy points in both games. had a huge week 12 here, and the Jaguars have a very favorable rest of the season schedule when it comes to the passing game. So yes, Christian Kirk's still the number one guy here. I like Christian Kirk a lot, but Zay Jones looks like a guy where if you grabbed him off the waiver wire at some point during the season, you're gonna really be glad you did, because it looks like Zay Jones will continue this for the rest of the season, and it could be another guy who helps teams win fantasy championships. All right, let's move back to the rookies, and let's start with Treylon Burks. Since coming back from IR, Treylon Burks has been nothing but great. And the nice thing here for Treylon Burks is he's all Tennessee really has to throw to, right? Like Robert Woods, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, like come on. No, Treylon Burks has been great since coming back from his injury, and he's been Ryan Tannehill's number one target by far. In each of the first 3 games since coming back from injury, his routes have gone up quite a bit, and also he's got over a 20% target share over that stretch. So unfortunately, he is on the Titans. They're not going to be an extremely pass-heavy team, but still, they have to throw the ball sometimes, and when they do, a lot of times it's going to be Treylon Burks, and we know he has that big play upside, that big play potential. So Treylon Burks, another guy, if you grabbed him off waiver wire a few weeks ago, like Pierre said in his Beat the Breakout before he was coming back from IR, you should be feeling great about him rest of the season. And then finally, we got to talk about George Pickens. This guy keeps making plays week after week. No, he's not putting up huge fantasy games, but he's just coming off 2 really tough matchups, and now he gets a rest of season schedule that is probably, it's not even probably, it is the best rest of season schedule for wide receivers. And we know this guy has the big play ability, the touchdown ability, and Kenny Pickett is slowly but surely looking not horrible, somewhat better. I mean, he's not looking great, but he's certainly looking better than he was early in the year. And Pickens, with all these matchups he has coming out, absolutely has smash potential, huge upside potential. So if you've been holding him since draft season, or if you picked him up at some point and stashed him, good for you, because now is the time to start unleashing George Pickens. I think from now to the end of the fantasy season, George Pickens has a great rest of the season and helps teams win championships. All right, let's move on to tight end. I got to start with TJ Hawkinson. What a difference the Vikings have made for TJ Hawkinson. Since being traded to Minnesota, he's had at least 9 targets in 3 of the 4 games he's played. He's caught at least 5 passes in all of those games, and he's the overall tight end 3 since week 9. That'll play. That'll work. TJ Hawkinson has an incredibly high floor in this offense and a decent touchdown type ceiling. So to me, rest of the season going forward, in this offense, TJ Hawkinson is a set and forget tight end. If you were struggling at tight end all year, or maybe you had Hawkinson on the Lions and you didn't like it, congratulations, you lucked out with that trade, but it's going to pay off. TJ Hawkinson, a locked-in, must-start tight end from now till the fantasy championship. And then I was really high on Dalton Schultz before the season, but look, a lot of things worked against Dalton Schultz. Number 1, week 1, Dak Prescott injured. Cooper Rush just didn't target Dalton Schultz. Then Dalton Schultz got injured, and he took a while to work his way back, had to deal with that knee injury. But we've seen, since he's gotten healthy and since Dak has been back, he has been pretty much great every single week, coming off a big Thanksgiving week here, and I don't think that's going to change rest of the season. Dalton Schultz was a guy I had as a top 5 tight end before the season, and now everything's back to the way it should have been. A healthy Dak, a healthy Schultz. I think he will be a top 5 tight end the rest of the season as well. So maybe you got Dalton Schultz when he was dropped, when he was injured or not doing anything. Maybe you drafted him and held on to him. Maybe you traded for him, whatever it was. Congratulations, Dalton Schultz, skyrocketing right now, and I think he continues rest of the season. And let's move on to quarterback. And I know a lot of people were really terrified for Justin Herbert, but it's time to relax. Justin Herbert is back. He's got Keenan Allen. He's good. And one thing about the Chargers and Justin Herbert, they have a great rest of season schedule when it comes to the passing game. And look at the 2 games since Keenan Allen has been back. Justin Herbert has scored over 20 fantasy points in each of those games, and he's the number 2 quarterback in 4-point touchdown leagues over those 2 games. And guess what? He's probably going to get Mike Williams back soon. Will it be week 13? Maybe. Will it be week 14? Maybe. But when he does, he's going to have all of his weapons. He has great matchups. He's going to smash. He's going to be, once again, going to be a top 5, set and forget, no doubt quarterback rest of the season. What you drafted him for, I know he didn't do that for most of the season, but it doesn't matter because now is when it matters. Justin Herbert to the moon for the rest of the season. And then finally, I said I was going to talk about Trevor Lawrence. Let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. Welcome, Trevor Lawrence, finally delivering on what we expected on him as the number one pick, not just this week, but the last 3 games. Over the last 3 games, since week 9, Trevor Lawrence is a QB 10. That's since week 9. That's 4 weeks. Because Trevor Lawrence has had a bye. Trevor Lawrence is the QB 10 with a bye. So with one less game, he's the QB 10. That's how good Trevor Lawrence has been over this stretch. He's averaging over 20 points per game during that stretch, and he only really has 2 matchups that should even kind of scare you, and that is Dallas and the Jets. Every other matchup is just a smash matchup for Trevor Lawrence. He's a guy I think is a must start every week in 1 QB leagues, and I would not surprise me if teams who picked up Trevor Lawrence off the waiver wire late in the season win championships this year, and he's on a lot of championship teams. So if you got Trevor Lawrence, congrats. He's skyrocketing you to a potential championship. All right, now you know the players that are skyrocketing down the stretch. What about who to start, who to sit, who could boom? Everything you need to help you win your Week 13 matchup, we got you covered. Check out our Week 13 playlist right here.